Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, really glad you're with us for the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Good, bad, crazy martinis for you as usual today. And Jim Garrity is here. However, he is soon to be off on the National Review cruise. So we will have a smattering of excellent guest hosts over the next couple of weeks, as well as Jim's book special. Jim's new book, Dueling Six Demons, the latest in the Dangerous Click series, comes out on Tuesday. So this coming Tuesday, we'll have a special episode that we're going to record to commemorate that and tell you a little bit about the book. But Jim, let's not wait any longer. The breaking news this morning, and a lot of people suspected because it was in Wilmington and the Bidens are an institution in the state and Jill Biden was in the back of the courtroom all throughout the trial, that somehow, some way, Hunter Biden, despite the facts being blatantly against him in his felony gun case, that somehow he was not going to be convicted. He was convicted on all three counts: making a false statement during a firearms sale, making a false statement during a transaction record, and illegal possession of a firearm. And if you paid much attention during the trial, you noticed that the evidence was clearly on his side. Even people that at least used to be fond of Hunter Biden had to testify that he was clearly using drugs at that time. His ex-wife, his ex-sister-in-law, who turned into his lover, that's a whole other story. Abby Lowell, the lawyer for Hunter Biden, basically was left to try and argue, well, I don't know that he was coked out of his mind at the moment he filled out the form. And if that's where you are, that's kind of shows you don't have a strong hand with the evidence. And the prosecutor smartly pointed out to Jill Biden and the other Bidens in the galleries during closing arguments, saying, they are not evidence. This is the evidence. This is what you need to base your decision on. So a lot of folks thought that somehow he's going to skate. He did not. We'll see what sentencing is like. That could create some controversy. But what do you make of the convictions today?
Celebrate good times. Come. Oh, I'm sorry, Greg. I was listening to the Kool and the Gang on my other feed in my headphones. Boy, but the only thing I would say is for those who are longtime critics of the Biden family and Biden, and for those who have thought that Hunter Biden has been really this shameless, self-destructive scofflaw for a really long time, the only people, like if you're the Republican National Committee, you just should not run around saying, oh, convicted felons are the worst. Now, that having been said, the Democrats who've been spending, man, convicted felons are just the worst. You don't want anybody like that anywhere near the White House. That's a little awkward today in light of this. No, I am genuinely happy about this news. People might think, oh, how could you take, look, this is a demonstration that in the United States of America, even if you are the vice president's son, if you blatantly break the law and you write about it in your autobiography, and, that within 6 years, the government and, after putting the world's most generous plea deal in front of you, if you turn that down, then eventually the long arm of the law will come to you and you will get convicted. Look, again, you're correct. It's entirely possible that sentencing is a slap on the wrist. I do think there's something there's a perfect demonstration of hubris here. As I mentioned a moment ago, there was a plea bargain offer on the table for Hunter Biden that was extremely generous. And Hunter Biden basically said, look, we want to add that if you find any additional crimes I did, you won't prosecute me. The Department of Justice whoa. We just gave you the most generous offer anybody's ever gotten. And you want a pony? You want a cherry on top too? You want something even more? So Hunter Biden turned it down, which was a really bad decision in retrospect. The facts in this case were never really in dispute. The only thing you could, as you alluded to, the interpretation was, well, yes, but was there cocaine literally up his nose as he was signing that document? And the jury's like, that's not how this measures. If you describe yourself as doing crack cocaine every 15 minutes before you signed the form, and then you were doing crack cocaine every 15 minutes after you signed the form, that's pretty much safe for us to conclude that, yes, you were a drug addict when you signed under penalty of perjury that you were not a drug addict. And you're probably thinking, how could this story get any better? How could this possibly be any more delicious? So the answer is, believe it or not, it can. Because today, President Biden is scheduled to speak later this afternoon at Everytown's Gun Sense University in Washington, where he will highlight, quote, the progress to keep guns out of dangerous hands. Well, you know what? Biden can point to something. Here's some progress. This was back in 2018, but nonetheless, it'll be interesting to see if President Biden speaks about his son's conviction today, what he says. You may recall that President Biden said that his son Hunter was the brightest guy he knows, and that's why he was hired by Burisma. I think it's a sign President Biden needs to get to know more people. You look at this, you alluded to the Tangled issue. The stripper that Hunter impregnated is now on a media tour. She's got a book coming out. My understanding, apparently came out just recently, Joe Biden has never met that sixth grandchild, Navy. And there's kind of this sense of look, whatever else is going on between Hunter and his former paramour, there's no reason to punish that little girl about it. Look, Hunter Biden is an enormously self-destructive person. And you could say, well, it's not Joe Biden's fault. And I don't think you can say it's entirely Joe Biden's fault. But I think this also does not align well with the image of good old Scranton Joe and his old-fashioned values, that his son is acting like Caligula and is this persistent scofflaw as the son of a president who talks about how tough he is on those who violate the law on guns, those who violate the law and not paying their taxes. And oh, by the way, he was meeting with every sleazy foreign businessman who came his way and taking massive gifts and putting him on the phone with his dad. But trust us, there was no influence peddling. I think it was it Devin Archer said it was only the appearance of influence peddling. And I'm like, look, when you can get the vice president on the phone, that's influence. You and I cannot get Joe Biden on the phone. Otherwise, we'd have a really fun interview.
Credit where credit is due here to Judge Nareka. She's the one who blew up that plea deal because I think the government was ready to pretty much let him skate on a lot of that stuff. And then she says, hey, prosecution team, do you really intend to excuse him from potential prosecution for pretty much anything ever? Oh, no, that's not what we agreed to.
How did that get in there? Did we? Oh, that was an early draft. We just forgot to take that out. Yeah. Whoopsie.
So he could have skated on this as well. A lot of folks on the right saying, because the DOJ slow played it, he's not going to get charged with the worst stuff because of statute of limitations on the influence peddling and all that stuff that you just referred to. And there's certainly reason to be very, very critical of that. But there were also a lot of people saying that even this would not happen, what we saw today, because of the Biden's legacy in Delaware and all sorts of other things. So again, we'll see what happens in sentencing. And then we move to everybody pays their fair share trial later this year in September when Hunter Biden is up on tax charges. But Hunter Biden is a convicted felon as of today on all three counts. And it didn't take the jury that long. A little bit of time yesterday and then pretty quick this morning as well.
Sometimes the jury has to deliberate a great deal. Sometimes it's a fairly quick decision. And in this case, they actually used the drive-through lane. So it was pretty straightforward. This one they do.
Field of Greens, great new sponsor to the 3 Martini Lunch. And I know you're trying to get all the vitamins and minerals that you should be getting and having a healthy diet. And perhaps you're taking some daily supplements to try and round that out. But on top of those supplements, you really need to get all the vegetables that your body is craving. And it's really hard to do that in actual servings. So you need to kind of supercharge that effort with Field of Greens.
Field of Greens is so powerful that it promises that at your next checkup, your doctor will notice your improved health or your money back guaranteed. Now, Field of Greens is unlike any fruit or vegetable or green product you've had before. It isn't just watered down extracts. Field of Greens is an organic superfood that is made from whole fruits and vegetables.
And I can tell you, the strawberry lemonade flavor I've been trying, very, very tasty. You're not going to have to grit your teeth while you're drinking this. You're going to enjoy it a lot and get even healthier. So don't look back and say, I should have paid attention to nutrition when I was younger. Field of Greens is a key to better health today when it matters most. To start, Field of Greens will give you 15% off your first order plus free rush shipping. Visit fieldofgreens.com and use the promo code 3ML. That's promo code 3ML to get 15% off and free shipping at fieldofgreens.com. Fieldofgreens.com. All right, Jim, on to our bad martini now, and it's basically more confirmation of what we said last week about this new border-related executive order from Joe Biden about how he can shut it down if we have 2,500 illegal crossings in a week. Well, the numbers really haven't seemed to dwindle in the days since then. And then hats off to Bill Malugin for finding this. He says Fox News has obtained an internal Border Patrol memo sent to agents in San Diego sector after President Biden's executive order took effect. instructing them to release single adults from all but 6 countries in the Eastern Hemisphere and classifying them as hard or very hard to remove. Specifically, the memo instructs agents to process all single adults from 100-plus countries in the Eastern Hemisphere as notice to appear or release on own recognizance, except for 6 countries which are deemed mandatory referral, which are Uzbekistan, Russia, Tajikistan, Georgia, Moldova, and Kyrgyzstan. President Biden and the DHS promised consequences and removal for those who cross illegally between ports of entry after the executive order took effect, but the overwhelming majority of illegal crossers in San Diego sector, including the Chinese, Middle Eastern, and African adults we've been showing, are still being released into the U.S. with future court dates, as our coverage has shown. Bottom line, in the short term, mass catch and release continues for illegal immigrants in the San Diego sector who continue pouring in from all around the globe. So, Jim, it's basically, here, American public, here's how I'm being tough on the border because Republicans are bad and they won't help me. Meanwhile, let's slip this little paper over to Border Patrol saying, hey, the vast majority of the people, just keep doing what you're doing.
Greg, this is further evidence that, as far as we can tell, if there are any exceptions to this worldview within the Biden administration, they hide it very well. That the Biden administration sees the circumstance of the border, the waves of migrants, the number of people who slip into the country, the difficulty of finding them once they enter the country. They see this as a political problem to be managed, not a policy problem to be solved. Very begrudgingly, they will take actions to look like they're doing something. But as we see from this report from Malugin, it won't actually make much of a difference at all. At best, it's going to be window dressing. It's going to simulate some sort of hardline policy, but it's not actually going to be a hardline policy. Now, longtime listeners to this podcast may notice I now refer to our policy as de facto open borders. And I did not do that for many years. I thought we had insufficient border security. I thought we had a poorly secured border, but I don't think you could, for a long time, I felt like it wasn't fair to call it open borders because that, the Border Patrol existed. They might be undermanned. They might have not have enough technology. We didn't have nearly enough, border security fencing as we should have. But there was some attempt at enforcement, and therefore it was unfair to label it. I no longer feel quite that way. Or I use the term de facto, legal Latin term meaning, in the fact of, effectively open borders. Because everybody knows that if you come across the border, you make a claim for asylum. Sometimes you say that gangs in your community are frightening you, particularly for for folks who are coming over from migrants from El Salvador, Nicaragua, other parts of Central America. Or other one, you just, say you can't go back to your home country because you're afraid you'll be tortured, punished, killed, etc. And then the U.S. says, okay, well, we need some time to evaluate this. So here's a court date in the year 2029 or something like that. And come back in a couple of years. And we'll, in the meantime, welcome to the United States, and you get to stay here because they're not going to send you back. Now, we obviously should be protecting people who genuinely need asylum, but it's now an open secret. And I've seen folks I respect left of center on Twitter who are acknowledging, hey, our asylum system is broken. The word is out. Everybody knows you can do this. And as a result of it, it's getting harder to protect people who are genuinely have genuine and indisputable asylum claims because everybody and their brother has effectively clogged up the system for years and years. So kudos to Malugin for reporting this. I don't think any of us are really shocked by this. I was reminded by a report earlier this year. I can't remember whether it was Politico or it was Axios, but it was one of those two. And there was kind of this long detailed profile of so how did the border get so bad under Biden? How could this, and the general consensus was that there was no political incentive to do this. That remember when Vice President Kamala Harris goes to Central America and says, don't come. Most of us are scoffing. Most of us say this is not a real effective policy. Nobody really believes the Biden administration really means that. But she still got a lot of grief from left-wing groups that effectively want open borders. So everybody's attitude in the Biden administration was yeah, we're supposed to patrol the border. Yeah, we're supposed to stem the tide, but nobody wants us to do this. We get endless grief from our leftist friends. It makes the cocktail parties very uncomfortable, and we don't want to do this anymore. And so there was always this foot dragging. Well, here we are, and we should not be surprised that in June 2024, Joe Biden is suddenly some born-again border hawk.
No, not at all. Not at all. My colleague Sarah Carter has talked to a number of people about this. If you watch Fox News, she's on there frequently covering the border. She did an interview not that long ago with a former federal official who knows this issue well. And he says, of the 10 million, 8 million, whatever it was at the time of the interview, people who have come to this country illegally claiming asylum, there's probably a few thousand, more than likely, that have actually got a legitimate claim there. And then I also saw a report just the other day quoting Jim Desmond, who's a county official in San Diego, where in that sector of the border is really seeing a pretty big influx right now. He says, keep in mind that if you have an asylum claim, you're supposed to find safety in the country closest to the one that you left. So these people who are coming in from different continents, come on, the idea that you can't find one other country between Syria or China or wherever these folks are coming from before you get to the United States is not very plausible. So, and just as if that weren't bad enough news, Jim, Malusian also reporting this. A Guatemalan illegal who entered the U.S. as a gotaway, which means he wasn't processed at the border. He just crossed in illegally, and we saw him through some sort of surveillance, but didn't actually apprehend him, has been arrested by Boston-based ICE deportation officers after he was charged with raping a child in Massachusetts and child in nude lascivious posing an exhibit, which I assume means some sort of disgusting child pornography here. He posed a significant threat to the children in our Massachusetts communities, said ICE Boston Field Office Director Todd Lyons. And so, Jim, not everybody coming in is going to be doing this sort of thing, but every time this happens, it's someone that should not have been here, and it's a crime, a heinous crime that's completely preventable.
Greg, to hear some people tell it, it's just endless hordes of valedictorians who are running across our border.
Not the case. Not the case at all. All right, let's talk about something way better than that. And we have talked about it a lot in the last couple of weeks, but hey, it is Tuesday and Father's Day is just 5 days away. Get that crate of Omaha steaks for your dad with steaks, the burgers, the pork chops, and beyond. We have loved our steaks. Mrs. Corumbus is always great at marinating steaks. And so when I had the sirloin, I said, boy, this is good. Did you marinate these too? And she's like, I did, but with the spices they sent. And so, like you were saying with the tartlets and the fries, they really do give you the whole meal. And she says it really makes meal planning real easy for that day. Omaha Steaks takes care of everything. I know you've had the same experience.
None of the fries were left by the time I got to the table. None of the tartlets were left. I did get some of the cheeseburgers, and they were really darn good. So, again, I wish I could give listeners a fuller, detailed description. Not that my family's within earshot. Could be even better than I think, dear listeners. You'll never know, thanks to teenage children.
And the burgers are really big, too. That's another
They
thing
are,
that
yes.
surprised me.
These are
Real
not
good
quarter
portions.
pounders. These are third of a pounders, it looks like. Half pound. I know, they're.
Oh, at least. Yeah, they're definitely bigger than quarter pounders. This year, make new memories with loved ones and show dad the love with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com to order the Father's Day gift packages starting at $89 with the code Martini. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code Martini. All right, on to our crazy martini now, Jim. And just yesterday, we talked about the disgusting protests in Lafayette Square, the pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas, anti-Israel, whatever label you want to use, pelting National Park Service employees, defacing monuments that have been there for decades or longer. And then a very similar thing happened in New York City last night. So this is not abating. AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, congresswoman from part of New York City, was taking part in some sort of online discussion where she talked about anti-Semitism. And while she says it's important to call it out where it exists, she says calling it out in some cases is really just kind of a racist weapon against people of color, and particularly, of course, women of color.
We can and should be equipping ourselves with the tools to recognize when actual anti-Semitism is clear and present, and also how to check it immediately when we see it. At the same time, it is also true that accusations and false accusations of anti-Semitism are wielded against people of color and women of color by bad faith political actors. And weaponizing anti-Semitism is used to divide us and create a false choice between the fight for Jewish safety and the cause for Palestinian self-determination.
Well, she might not be quite as bad as Rashida Tlaib, but her definition of anti-Semitism and the normal definition of anti-Semitism, I think, are quite different. Jim, I would say that if you're critical of the policies of the government of Israel, as I think just about everyone probably from at some point or another, like when Ehud Barak tried to give away the store, I thought that was a pretty bad idea, although it did expose that Arafat would never make a deal. And I would say, hey, where was the intel on for about October 7th? Or why did it take so long in some places to get a response there? So there are policy criticisms, but to say that Israel shouldn't exist, or to be the guy in New York City last night who says he wishes Hitler was still around so all the Jews could get wiped out, or whatever the chant is that makes it very, very obvious. AOC is just trying to run cover for a lot of folks here, and it's pretty transparent.
Greg, the only thing I would add to that is if you are judging the Israeli government by a different standard than you judge every other government on earth, if you're not anti-Semitic, you're like right next door. You're in the neighborhood. And that's generally a sign that you see the lone Jewish nation on earth differently than every other government. Usually means you have some sort of different, higher standard that is often much more difficult or impossible to meet. And, look, you and I would observe the rescue operation that brought home 4 hostages is something to celebrate. Yes, of course, there were civilian casualties involved. That's what happens when you hold hostages in dense urban areas with lots of civilians around. But this goes on over the weekend. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez does not offer any comment about that. Certainly doesn't offer any praise for Israel. Hey, guys, job well done. Glad you got those hostages back. Or even just simply being thankful that the hostages are no longer in captivity. Her first comment about anything related to this was a response saying that, it's almost like AIPAC, the American Israeli Political Action Committee, functions as a political slush fund for Republican billionaires and should not have influence in the Democratic Party, let alone our primaries. Well, first of all, by the way, this is not accurate because 67 out of 67 AIPAC endorsed Democrats have won their primaries this year. And of course, there are 13 members of the Black Caucus, 21 members of the Progressive Caucus, 16 members of the Hispanic Caucus. In other words, it's, you can be pretty darn progressive, but if you are pro-Israel, AIPAC is going to back you. All right. So the idea that, this is some secret Republican way of influencing it. Secondly, if you want to say, AIPAC should not have influence in the Democratic Party, how are you going to do that? How exactly would you like to do that? But anyway, it was Stephen Miller. Red Steez on Twitter, sometimes known as the other Stephen Miller, not the one who worked in the Trump White House, who just had he's had this recurring theme of comments about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And I think he's right. I can't prove it, but I do think her statements like this are effective demonstration of it. Yeah, the way Stephen puts it is, Israel rescued 4 innocent people who did nothing but attend a music festival on October 7th, saw their friends murdered, were kidnapped, and while 1,400 other Jews were murdered and burned alive. This is her first statement, referring to the one complaining about AIPAC. Now, here's what's interesting about Stephen's conclusion to this. She hates her job so much. She wanted to be out there with a kiffia around her face and spray painting statues. She hates her job. Now, look, I can't look into Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's mind. I can only judge based on what she says and what she does and what we get to see when she's in public. And you can make an argument. I've seen, good folks I respect on the right have an argument about, does AOC, is she influential or not? She certainly gets a lot of attention. She has a lot of followers on Twitter. Her live streams get a lot of attention, et cetera. But I don't know if you can say that she actually influences the Democratic Party as a whole, whether she has the influence over policy as a whole that she wishes she had. And in fact, quite a few profiles have indicated that there are a lot of other House Democrats who kind of can't stand her and find her kind of somebody who's always crying out for attention. So it's kind of interesting. You can make an interesting argument that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is like another member of Congress known by 3 initials, MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene, getting a lot of attention, being the center of attention a lot, but not actually influencing policy and the outcomes. So does Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez really enjoy being a member of Congress? I think it's an open question. But I think when you see stuff like this, that at her heart, she's an activist. At her heart, she is anti-establishment. And guess what? You're a member of Congress. You're now part of the establishment. And you can't run around spray painting stuff in Lafayette Park. It's much tougher to join the rallies and chant, harass Jews on campuses, chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free and stuff like that. I do think it's a really interesting question of whether AOC finds being in Congress as much fun as she thought it was going to be, as useful and as productive as she thought it was going to be. And I think when we see comments like this, it's an interesting indication that she is finding the entire process of being a member of Congress way too much of a compromise to her idealistic spirit.
No, I think there's probably a lot of truth to that. You're also right about the double standard. The UN, of course, has a complete double standard against Israel. They look the other way whenever Hamas or other bad actors in the neighborhood do things. And then anytime there's a retaliation, whoa, what are you doing there? Israel and the Democratic Party, led by Joe Biden, seems to be getting squeamish about it as well. Don't know how much different it would be if he wasn't up for re-election this year. But and then some people are just tone deaf on Twitter. I wish I could remember the person who said it, but the response was pretty overwhelming. Could you imagine what the reaction would be if Palestinians came into Israel and slaughtered a couple hundred people to rescue 4 people? And I'm like,
imagine. Let's take out the rescue 4 people part, and let's just imagine if something like that happened.
Right. 1,200 people at least, and how quickly they forget just 8 months ago.
How skewed is your worldview if you look at this and you say, God, Hamas gets demonized and smeared. Hamas can never get a fair shake from the media. Really? Really? You know, I have a limited amount of cares to give. There was another word I could have used there. The idea that Hamas just can't get a fair shake in the media and everyone's always being so hard on them, first of all, I reject the entire notion. But even if that were true, even if like Hamas were just getting, never getting a fair shake, you need an electron microscope to find the size of the violin I'm willing to play for those guys.
Yeah, it's like when Tom Brady or LeBron James think they're not getting the right calls. I'm like, hello.
Yeah,
the entire league is geared around you.
Yeah, Hamas, that's the only way we're ever going to compare Hamas to LeBron James or Tom Brady. And you know what? As a longtime Patriots hater, you know what? Tom Brady's up here. Hamas is down here. Tom Brady is better than Hamas. Don't say I never said anything nice, Patriots fans.
The comparison was trying to work the reps when they're clearly in your corner. But hey, it's a good takeaway anyway. Jim, have a good day. Have a great cruise. And I'll talk to you later.
I will see you in a little while, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you don't already and tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch Podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a great Tuesday and join us again on Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.